Hello, hello, hi, hi. Thank you very much for joining us for another program here in Opera We Love Singing. It's been a couple of weeks that we hadn't been with you, but please remember that we were recovering ourselves. Me from an ear problem, and Katia for for a multitude of problems that derive from her teeth removal. So everything went horribly wrong. Thanks God. Fortunately, she's already in a good level of recovery, still suffering of some of the consequences of it. And I am pretty sure she never expected this to happen when she was thinking of her teeth and attending the dentist. Remember also that when a singer is unable to sing, this is virtually the most horrible thing that can happen to a singer. So that's pretty much where Katia comes from. And for that reason, she will be mostly singing, speaking very little, and I am going to be handling the best part of it, which is mostly speaking and not singing. And as I was sharing with her, approving and disapproving with my nodding of the head and saying, "Oh no, this can't be possible," or "Yes, it was very good." So that will be my job today. And as you may have already noticed in our title for today, past in the past programs we have devoted more than we have devoted the past programs not for specifically opera. This time, yes, we are going back to the opera, but again, we are taking into account a gender that is somehow not very much often sung on stage, given a number of reasons that we would like to share with you as we progress in the program. But there is something around this music. I was sharing in the description of the video the early stages of the opera. If we are already calling it opera, the very first representations of theater and music. That's what this period is about. Sometimes referred as Baroque or the early stages of opera that we will be describing you shortly. For that purpose, Katia has prepared for today a few numbers of this period, which I was telling you is very, very, very interesting. Not only because the orchestration is different, the plots or the librettos tend to be much simpler than the very contradictory and difficult of the recent ones. But there is still this very nice sound that the music of this period is part of. There is also something around students who want to actually sing that are given these parts to make them part of the repertoire. But of this and a lot more, we will be talking about. And since we are following Katya's orders, if I remember well, you will start by sharing with us the Lascia Chiopianta. Am I correct? That's where we are starting with. This is a very, very, very famous, hyper famous piece of music written by Georg Friedrich Händel, who is also a master himself. A lot of the development of the opera has to do with what he actually wrote in the beginning of it. But let's stop talking because remember that I like talking too much, and let's go for the music and let's thank Katia for making this effort of joining us today.
Lascia io pianga la cruda sorte e che sospiri la libertà.
I, I think this could be one of the saddest because one thing about the Baroque is that there are many songs that are nicely beautiful, but many are nicely beautiful but are sad. And this one of Lascia Chiopang Pianga, Please Let Me Cry, because my destiny, my fortune is so sad, so dark. It has to be sung in such a way, and I would like you to share us with us a little of your thoughts behind how this must be sung. But before we get there, I wanted to share that there is many people who think that this repertory is very old, which is true if we compare it to the most recent operas. But they use it not as a describer of time, but as a describer of antiquette for a given technique of singing which is old-fashioned for singers who have limited capabilities, limited voices. So they say, "Oh, your voice is not strong enough for Puccini or Verdi. Go and sing Baroque." As if singing Baroque would be that easy. But tell us a little about the difficulties of singing. We will also talk a little later ahead about the virtuosism in this period, which also has lots of it. But keeping that it doesn't have a thousand cadenzas, thrills, and all those ornaments does not mean that this is an easy part. But share with us a little of the difficulties you find in the interpretation and from the vocal technique perspective for this piece.
Yes. Well, if you want to be a real singer, you have to study a lot and understand Baroque in all its context. It's not easy music at all, like you just mentioned, because you have to notice to take advice that it is the music has like very clear periods, and it means different types of working and approaching and abording the genres, the different kind of genres. When you're singing Baroque, you have to understand that we are seeing the first opera, and it means a lot of things. It means that the main themes, for example, it's about mythology. We are taking lots of themes from the Greek mythology, Greek Roman mythology. We are recovering things from the Greek theater, and the opera is in many cases not structured as Mozart or Verdi or Rossini or Puccini. It's the early age uh, of the opera. Uh, the vocal work, it's also in their early age, the voices are coming from the Gregorian chant, where the voice is very pure, not vibrating, not virtuosistic, like in bel canto, for example. But we have an interesting work here in Baroque, because you have the same area, uh, but you have to sing it in different way. That's the freedom and the responsibility, because you have to sing the first part as is written, then you sing a contrast part, and then you re-expose the first part, but singing variations. But you have to respect the style and the genre and the time where it was written. So you can make a trill, for example, as you sing a trill in Mozart. So it's complicated.
It is, and tell us a little about how you feel when you sing this repertory.
Well,
What does it
uh,
carry to your mind or to your voice? You feel comfortable, or what are the sensations of you as a singer when you sing it?
Yes, I feel comfortable because it is pretty much virtuosistic actually. You have to have a very light voice, and you have to work with a lot of line. So these are things that I skills that I have been working on my voice. And I mean, it's not Olympia, it's not the Queen of the Night, but it's virtuosistic too, a lot. So you have to flow. I've shared with all of you, for example, Tornami a Vaguejar.
Yes.
Please, it's not an easy piece of music at all. Probably you don't find so many high notes, but let's remember that music and its complications, it's not only about high notes. If you want to sing Baroque, you have to sing really fast because there are lots of ornaments. Let's remember that Baroque is the fear of the empty. So the music is plenty of I forgot adornos.
Ornaments.
There are lots of ornaments. Thank you. So you have to work a lot in your agilities, for example, if you want to sing Baroque.
And not only, if you allow me, not only it has a very particular type of virtuosism and ornaments, it also, as it is the case of bel canto, it really demands a singer with a very solid technique. For some reason, it is given
Of course.
to students who are just starting their career, but since this gender, this school, I would rather say this school of the Baroque needs a perfect pitch, perfect intonation, perfect use of the breath, perfect diction, perfect attack of the consonants, an extraordinary legato. I mean, all of that is not what a beginner singer would usually have. So it is usually given because they
No.
say, well, there are not very high notes, there are not many low notes, so any singer could do it. But if you want to do it well, it really doesn't take just any singer. It takes a great singer to work on those pieces. And I wanted also to use your comment, not only because I am comfortable on the first row of the seats, enjoying to these pieces today, but there is a reason for that, and it doesn't have to do with the fact that I sung too much the last two programs. It has to do with the fact that in this period of opera, the voices of tenors were irrelevant. Most of the cases,
Always.
well, Katya says that that is still the case, but more in those centuries, there was not much to do around the voice of a tenor. They would be very secondary to anything. The technique and what those voices could do, no one really cared. But
Well, not even sopranos.
and now, and that's what
Let's
I
be
was
honest.
getting there. Yeah, it was because the castrati were the superstars. But let's remember that the castrati were, and we never, I mean, at least in the past century, we never had a chance of keeping uh, good number testimonies, recorded testimonies of how they sounded. You can read history, and it is said that you have to imagine the brightness of a soprano voice with the steadiness of a male voice. Put them both together in a blender, insert agilities, and that would be a castrato. That is not what a tenor can do. That is not what a soprano can do. They can do both things separately, but never together
It's not
because
what a mezzo can do.
not even a mezzo. And recently, there was a movie Farinelli something, because Farinelli was one of the most famous castrati, and there are arias just like the ones that Katia is bringing for us today. And in fact, it is the case of the following one, because if I remember well, Anto Jove is part of that movie, and it took the voice of Cecilia Bartoli along with the voice of countertenor, and they mixed two or three voices together to try to reach the what we think or suppose that it was how those voices sounded. And given that that I would say what they could people who attended those recitals, those concerts, or those operas, they listened to a sound that never later was heard again. But if we take in mind that the castrati suffered in the earliest, in fact, that's why they were called castrati because they were actually castrated so that they would never develop or change their voice into a male one. So the price of success was very, very, very high. Moreover, when you think that it was their families who put them into that role and that they were mainly victims. So
Yes.
it is of course a virtuosism, but it is based on the atrocity of hurting another human being. To be fair.
And it is brutal because in many cases, boys were castrated, and even they didn't develop a virtuosistic voice, so it was for nothing.
Yeah, and that
Ugh.
was even worse. Yeah, just imagine that your family decided to make you go through that, and at the end, your voice was not what they expected. Horrible suffering for those human beings. And that's what humans can do sometimes to get the pleasure and the fun and what they want. But let's get back to the music. I recalled it well. It is Alto Jove, what we will be listening now. You're singing that,
Yeah,
right? And that is another very very interesting piece because not only, as I was mentioning, I recall that it is part of the Farinelli movie, but also because sometimes here and there, I mean. There are many Hollywood movies that when they play a scene that is serious or somebody that is rich, there is always in the background the voice of singing mostly Baroque that is heard. That is usually how Hollywood pictures these kind of pieces. And let's stop the talking and let's allow Katia to share with us this magnificent piece of music which, if I remember well, it was written by Porpora. Yeah, by Nicola Porpora.
that's right.
Yeah, let's thank Katia for sharing this one with us.
Alto Giove, e tua grazia e tuo gran dono di vita immortale che doceno, doceno sovrano, sovrano mi fa. Yeah, you have to be using all your skills all the time because your low notes must be high in a high impostation, but your high notes must have this chest color. So you have to be using everything all the time, and it's not easy. Forgive me. I think that probably I got COVID, so I'm suspecting that I really got COVID. So I'm breathing so much more of what I used to breathe, and I hope I don't die tomorrow.
I just noticed that it's been around a minute that you heard me, but that it didn't go through the recording. So you heard me, people saw me speaking, speaking, and speaking. But well, fortunately, they could hear you. But what I was about to share is that we mentioned, not in this series, but in the previous series, that singers have to be very diligent in the sense that they have to rehearse a good number of hours per month, per week, sorry. Yeah, and you also shared with us that even per day, in your case, because the voice is very jealous. If you don't pay attention to the voice for a week, for 2 weeks, then the high notes, when you want to go back, the high notes are not there, the low notes are not there, the coloratura is not there, or something is missing. The voice wants to be rehearsed all the time, and when it is rehearsed properly, it also pays back very well. So this has been your case that you have that this disease has put you into rest into mandatory pause. Maybe that's the reason why your lungs are still not back as strong as they were in the past. I'm not sure if I would dare to say COVID, but I would say that because it's been almost 3 weeks or a month, right? That you needed to start making this process.
Yes, because well, it all started when my teeth were removed,
Yeah, the first
and
ones.
I was resting. Yes, I was fine. Uh, then it passed a week, and the other two were removed, and I was fine. And suddenly, I said I sang in a program. I said, "Oh, I have to," and I sang with you. I remember it was your program, but I sang. And
You
the
sang
next
Cor
day,
Ingrato, if I remember well.
yes, I sang Cor Ingrato, and then it was like, yes, I'll study a little bit, and I go for a walk, and I was surprised by the rain, and I died the next day.
And that's why
But
we are sending Orfeo to get you from hell,
yes,
which is
please.
basically the next. But before we jump into the next piece, I also wanted to share that there is a reason why also many people don't like this period or the early stages of opera, mainly because it is not Bellini, Puccini, Donizetti, Rossini, our most known composers, but it is because these operas tend to be very static. There is very little movement on the stage. There is very few things happening on the stage. It's not like Cavalleria Rusticana where Turido is killed in a duel, or or those horrible things that happen in the Verismo. No, it is a much more quieter ambient. And maybe we should also talk also a little about the orchestration. The
It has
orchestration
to be a lot.
the orchestration is also so very delicate. And besides being the style of every composer, the the orchestration is secondary to the voice. not as in Verdi when there are times when the voice is competing with the orchestra. Like in the Quella Pira, the choir is singing loud, the orchestra is full sound, and there is a tenor trying to reach a high C. There is nothing about that. There is this very light orchestration, very few instruments. Uh, Mezzo forte maybe, occasionally forte, but most of the times between pianissimo and mezzo forte, so that the voice like it's like for me something like an enchantment. You listen to a voice coming from somewhere, singing these very nice notes, and it is like from my perspective like willing to be carried away by the music, exploring like very intimate emotions instead of shouting out loud like Carmen, like if you are going to kill me, do it now. You will never see something that intense in these early stages of opera. But now let's jump to
Enorme!
Enormous! Yeah, this time we are jumping to, or we are going back to again one of the most famous characters of the Greek mythology, the lover who descends to hell to rescue his beloved one, which at the end didn't work for because she messed up horribly. And really, she messed up,
That's
but
not love. Nothing will be.
but the intention of Orfeo is very nice, and there are many compositions around Orfeo. But the most famous one is the one that we are about to share, because now he's going to be weeping, crying, asking himself, "What am I going to do without my beloved Eurydice?" So che farò senza Euridice? Dove andrò? Che farò? And the lyrics or the words are really not more than three or four, but the way he takes it goes back to che farò senza Euridice. That very light emotion that has been
You
sung
can
on.
sing it.
I could if I had the score by at hand, but I don't recall
I
it.
will
But
send it to you.
I don't know it by heart, so that's why I cannot sing it. But when I am in a given mood, I like to sing it because I think, and maybe if I can share it with you for a second, I think that one of the most horrible errors that singers and mostly tenors commit is that, as I have shared with you in the past, tenors like to sing out everything loud. Everything has to be loud, everything has to do impressive, even the breathing when rapping has to do exaggerated. So for some reason tenors are not the most elegant singers. And I think that pieces like this, like Que faros en su Euridice, besides telling you how to breathe, how to have a nice impulse station without overdoing anything, I think that many tenors would benefit from that. So they could learn that shouting is not always necessary, and that you can still do art while working on something as nice
Because
as these
here
pieces.
you're thinking in loud voice, but it's for you.
It is, it
So that
is.
has to be intention.
But the thing about tenors is that when even they have their intimate thoughts, they still shout out loud. Come La solita storia del pastore, because La solita storia del pastore, besides telling a story, it is pretty much a monologue, but it is not sung intimately. It is, and basically at the end, you are almost shouting that fatale io sempre di lei, mi fai tanto male, ai, ma, but man, go for the me forever, when it has to be much quieter, much nicer. Maybe not as much as Orfeo, but it gives you a very good hint of what you can do with a voice without overdoing things. But if you don't mind, you may have already perceived that I like this aria very much, and it certainly is. I really love it. So let's give this. Let's thank Katya now for sharing this very beautiful Que farò senza Euridice?
Give me a sec.
Yeah, sure. Also keep in mind that she's still recovering from the recent disease, so we have to be understanding for that.
Thank you. Che farò senza Euridice? Dove andrò senza il mio bene? Che farò? Dove andrò? Che farò senza il mio bene? Dove andrò senza il mio bene? Euridice, Euridice, oh Dio, rispondi, rispondi. Io son pur il tuo fedel, io son pur il tuo fedel. Che farò senza Euridice? Dove andrò senza il mio bene? Che farò? Dove andrò? Che farò senza il mio bene? Dove andrò senza il mio bene? Euridice, Euridice, a non m'avanza più soccorso, più speranza. Che farò senza Euridice? Dove andrò senza il mio bene? Che farò? Dove andrò? Che farò senza il mio bene? Dove andrò? Che farò? Dove andrò senza il mio bene? Dove andrò senza il mio bene?
And yeah, well, que farò senza il mio ben? So what I am going to do with that, without this love of mine, is how this famous, well, I think Orfeo and Euridice must be of the most famous unfortunate lovers of all history, not only of the ancient Greek myth, but mostly in the world of human creation. This is story of the woman you love, but you lose her somehow. You're willing to go to hell to rescue her. All you have is to meet your music to accompany, to be with you. And when you are about to triumph over the tragedy, everything she goes back to she dies forever, like it's like if destiny would be telling you no matter what you do you are condemned to be left by the love of your life. So that's the type of sadness that Orfeo has been sharing with us. And now I think that it is also time to also say that we have shared about the type of voices that sing it, that we no longer have those voices anymore, that the orchestration, that it used to be static, that it is a repertory that Hollywood likes a lot to be put. in the background in given a good number of scenes. We have also mentioned that they are usually given to beginner students, which may call them a tremendous trauma when they realize that they need close to perfect voice in order to do some to sing it fairly well. But we also have to think about the lack, the very unfortunate lack of representations on nowadays for this repertory. You can maybe watch a recording from Grinderborn, maybe from the Salzburg Festival, or occasionally at the Royal Opera House. But most of the times, in the case of Mexico, I don't even remember when it was the last time that an opera from this early stage was on stage. I really don't even recall when
Uh,
it was the last time. But you have very often La Boheme, you have very often Traviata, you have more or less often Madama Butterfly, other titles that of course call many people. But I also think that if you want to be what people like to be to call cultivated, if you want to be a cultivated a lover of opera, you really need to approach these all these compositions because you have to see them as this is how it all started. We would have never had a Turandot, Aida, a Chocho San, a Mimi, or anybody else, not even a Norma. We would have never even had a Norma if things hadn't started with people like
with Orfeo.
Handel or Gluck or Porpora or the many others. What are your thoughts about this lack of having this quality of material on stage?
I think it's a pity. It's a shame. There are incredibly beautiful works, and it's a waste. Last year, I was invited to sing Orfeo, and I think it was a great opportunity to approach to this repertoire to Baroque on stage because I've been singing things like Tornami. I've sung Cleopatra in the program. Even I've sung. Please help me. Hmm, what's the name? I sing it, but I forgot. uh, it's Cleopatra. Help me, please.
The name of
Yes. This aria.
give me a second.
Piangero,
Cancerola Sorte Mio.
piangero,
Cancerola Sorte Mio.
la sorte mia. Yes, and I'm starting to prepare the entire role of Cleopatra because it's plenty of beautiful arias. It's probably one of my favorite characters. And I think that there are lots of beautiful music in Baroque period. I don't know why people uh, doesn't want to sing and perform it.
Maybe because of the easiness of the applause. If we adhere to my example of the tenors, why would a tenor care for anything from the early stage of opera when you can barely find a piece? Or if you want to go for the Kefaros and Suridici, but that requires perfect pitch, good breathing technique, a nice intonation. Why going for that effort when you can say "Que gelida mania" and be sure that everybody's going to applaud? Like you most of the times you just go for the easy way. But I also recall that fortunately, if not very much represented on stage of the opera houses, there has been a good number of recordings of singers, and maybe at this point I would like to name Philippe Haruski, the
Oof.
French countertenor. You may or may not like his voice. You may or may not like what he has done with his assembly. But you have to what you have to accept is that he has digged into to many beautiful pieces of music that many people have not taken the time of studying and presenting them. Uh, there are a number of concerts of recordings that I have had the chance of watching because the atmosphere, tends to be like very quiet, very intimate. You listen to and when you're lucky enough, even the instruments that they are playing are have been recovered from those centuries. So you're actually listening to how a mandolin could sound back there, and many other instruments. And it is very interesting to try to get how it was 4 or 5 centuries ago when all that music was starting, and that you would have a singer, a virtuosistic singer, in front of you singing those beautiful notes. I
Yes.
think that's very fortunate that there are many recordings of that. I also, the thing is that I don't recall his name in full, but I find yesterday, 2 days prior to today, that there is also another countertenor. I'm not sure what his nationality is, only I'm sure that he's from Europe. And it is very cool because he happened, it is Jacob something, and he not only is a countertenor, but he also is a breakdance dancer. So he does all those body movements on this while dancing. Of course, not in the same program. So he has the two careers. And I also found that he's
Okay.
a very famous TikToker, and he's very young. And I saw a recording of him. I forgot the aria. Uh, that the interesting part of it is that that in these recitals, in these concerts, the singer is usually very well dressed and all that. Well, he's singing in shorts with like if he was at the beach, and the pianist is as
Okay.
well. So I think it was very hot there, so they were very comfortable. And he said that he did it because we have been so stiff, so strict in the opera, that the opera is not attracting any more people, and that he wanted to show that it really doesn't depend on what you're dressing to do a good performance. And his performance was very good, by the way. So I think I'm going to look for more information because I like the project he's having. Somehow our project is somehow close to that. We don't want to be that stiff. We want to be more relaxed, more human, more closer to people who are watching, actually sharing our own thoughts around the opera instead of, you know, like being very serious. And now let me introduce Maestra Katia Arellano, who will be performing an aria from the
Seriously,
early
that's
period.
what we are doing in this program.
Yeah, yeah. So I will look for. I hope he shared in that interview that he found that there are many other singers doing similar projects around the world. So hopefully, I will have the chance of sharing with you another of those projects soon. But for now, I just noticed that I changed the order because the next piece is. I think that Kefaros and Seuridice was going to be the last, but
Oh God,
Ombra Mai Fu is going to be the final piece for today.
yes,
Another
I
masterpiece, usually sung also by countertenors, mezzos, or contraltos, but it was written by Handel. Without Handel, we would have not what we have now in the opera. And Ombra Mai Fu is also, I don't know. It has been recorded for, it has been part of 1,000 movies already. Everybody wants to have that in the background, playing in a number of scenes. And we are going to wrap up today's program with that very beautiful aria. Would you like to share some final thoughts before we jump to the final piece of today's program?
yes. I think that we have to give a chance to Baroque music. You were speaking about how intimate it might be, and I think that it has to do with the first performances. Let's remember that Baroque period and this first operas were written for specific courts. So it was performed not in a theater, but in a house. Okay, it was a palace or a castle, but it's still a house. It was for the court, not to the public. So the orchestration, it's very intimate, and the vocal work, it's also intimate because even when it was a big space, it was not like a theater uh, designed for, I don't know, 600 persons.
Yeah, that is also very important.
So that's why it is very warm music, and it's delightful.
It certainly is. Well, with those words, I would like to thank people who have been following us in the post recording or the post transmission in YouTube. And of course, then again, thank people in the podcast who have been very loyal to our program. And now that Katya has almost recovered, we are more ready to continue with our cycle. And well, thanks everybody. And let's share or let's listen to Katya's rendition of this very beautiful Ombre Mai Fu by Handel.
Let's go ahead.